so pleased to start off today's presentation with Dr. Cordula Dick-Muehlke. Dr. Cordula is a nationally recognized dementia care professional with a background in both psychology and theology. Cordula has given over 400 presentations, published multiple journal articles, is an associate professor at UCI, is a consultant in aging and dementia, and developed the concept and first spirituality conference about a dozen years ago. We are all here today because of the ideas and work of Cordula Dick-Muehlke. I am sure you will enjoy today's presentation on a faith-based approach to successful aging. Please welcome a consummate professional, my colleague and friend, Dr. Cordula Dick-Muehlke.
Well, that was very kind, and so I have to start by saying how pleased I am to be here at Hoag. Many of you know I was Executive Director at Alzheimer's Family Services Center for many years, and I certainly want to do a shout out to the Department of Community Health and to Dr. Gwen Perry for having invested in starting this conference and for continuing to invest in this conference and addressing, I think, the growing awareness and appreciation of spirituality in our lives, and especially in spirituality as we age. And so, you know, over the years, I've given a lot of thought here to just want to make sure I know what I'm doing up here. Given a lot of thought to what it means to grow older. I've worked with older adults for 30 years, and that's challenged me to reflect a lot on that. And so I wanted to present what I think I've grown to understand about aging and how faith and our spiritual traditions can influence the way we think about aging. So because I'm the kickoff speaker and because it's about 7 minutes to 9, and because we're all still waking up, we have to start with at least one interactive question, and this interactive question is, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? And I'd like a few shout outs about what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about growing older. Anybody want to shout out?
Pain.
Pain. All right. Anybody else? I'm not hearing what.
Less able.
Less able.
Still alive.
Limited mobility. Slowing down. Uselessness.
Stress.
Lack of hearing. What was that one in the back?
More fun.
More fun. Anybody else?
Stress.
Stress, loneliness. Higher cost. Frustration.
Good memory.
Good memory, and sometimes not so good memory back there.
Wiser.
Wiser. You know, this audience is not much different than the audiences out in the public. I think I'm a little sad about that. I thought maybe a whole room of people who are interested in spirituality and aging might come up with more positive words. I gave this talk at a church recently, or I should say an abbreviated version of this talk at a church lately, and guess what? I heard about 15 negative terms about aging, similar to the ones you threw out there, before we ever got to any positive attribute about growing older. So that's something we want to think about today. So this is a very interesting word cloud, and if you're not familiar with word clouds, the larger the word, the more frequently the word was mentioned in a survey or as a theme, and this particular one is from Fact or Fiction, which is a report by the Australian Human Rights Commission. And the question there, you can see, is over 2,000 Australians were asked about how the media portrays older people. Well, the big ones there are forgetful, slow, frail, vulnerable, grumpy, sick. Those were the most common words as reflected in that word cloud. Now, these are the stereotypes we live with on a daily basis and our older adults live with on a daily basis, and the result of these stereotypes is discrimination. And those people, now these 2,000 Australians were anywhere from 18 years old all the way into older adulthood, and the older adults said that they experienced discrimination, a large percent of them, and they described this discrimination not just as being turned down as for a position at a job, but as being ignored, treated with disrespect, and subjected to jokes about growing older. So, ageism. Robert Butler, a famous geriatrician, coined the term ageism, and you can see it defined there as a systematic stereotyping and discrimination against people because they are old. That definition has expanded over the decades to include discrimination against any age group. But at its core, or its heart, it started with discrimination and stereotyping of people who are older. And I think that article and the call out in the article illustrates the great, or speaks to the great risk of ageism. Ageism allows younger people to see old people as different to themselves. Therefore, they gradually stop seeing their elders as human beings. And that is the risk, that we marginalize older adults. We marginalize them because of their age. We marginalize them because of their disabilities, whether that be chronic illnesses, medical illnesses, or situations like Alzheimer's disease. So, as you can see there, you're in great shape for your age. You should easily outlive your usefulness. One of the great problems that we have is that we apply and project midlife values onto growing older. And that gets in our way of experiencing the benefits of growing older. So let's talk about this stigma. Stigma is a Greek word, as you can see there. It means mark, dot, puncture. In fact, the Athenians would actually puncture the arms of a slave or a criminal in order to better identify such people if they were to run away. And you can see today from Webster's dictionary that stigma is defined as a mark of disgrace, a mark of shame, discredit, or stain. Irving Goffman, who wrote a seminal work in 1963 called Stigma, Notes on the Management of a Spoiled Identity, said that stigma moves the person from a whole and usual person to a tainted and discounted one. And this is what we do with our older adults and in other stigmatized areas or conditions or matters. So this is an interesting comment from Kevin A. Dean. He has schizophrenia and depression, and he describes himself as a Christian. And he has a website called Voices of Glass, and you can see, he says, hopefully we all know by now that stigma is wrong. It is unhealthy, it is unhelpful, it is harmful, it is unjust. Hopefully we all actively fight against stigma and resist applying it to others. But ask yourself this: what about how you treat yourself? Are you ever guilty of applying stigma to yourself? So he is talking about a process which we term self-stigmatization. This is a process in which the stigma is not just out there in the world, in these stereotypes, in the media, but it's when we internalize that stigma and we start stigmatizing ourselves. So we buy into it. And how does that process happen? Well, here's a little example of that process of self-stigmatization. First, there's awareness. There's awareness, the public, the media thinks older adults are useless. Then I agree with that. Guess what? That's right. I think that too. Older adults are basically useless. And then you apply that to yourself. I am old, so I must be useless. That's the danger when we start to buy into the stigma. and the harm occurs. Because I am useless, I am not worthy or able. So why try? It's the why try effect. So why try, for example, to volunteer? I don't have anything to offer. I'm useless. I'm not able. So you can see this cognitive process that occurs that damages the individual's self-image. I have to tell you again, when I gave this talk again recently at a church, I was so touched when one of the older adults afterwards, who was obviously frail, and I think this might mean more to you at the end of this talk, but was obviously frail, and said to me, "You did so much for our self-image today, because I helped that group and that individual in particular shift this around to say, no, I'm not going to buy into that popular view of aging." So again, back to the Australian survey, the individuals that were asked about, that indicated that they felt that they were being discriminated against. The subgroup of older adults who said, yes, we feel discriminated against because of these stereotypes, were then asked, well, how does that discrimination make you feel? And again, the word cloud shows you that there were a group of people that tried to reject that stereotype. They became angry. But there was a significant group also. What's the other largest word up there? They started to do this self-stigmatization process because it was making them feel worthless, sad, useless, unworthy. So I would consider our popular approach to successful aging, if you had to summarize it in one word, is how in the world do I escape it? How in the world do I avoid growing older? Well, this is something that is an age-old pursuit, and Ponce de Leon came to the New World because he was looking for a fountain of youth, and he came to Florida looking for that. You can see there's this magical idea that somehow we would step into this fountain of youth and come out on the other end looking like we were 20. And today we've created a multi-million-dollar industry to stop us from aging. And that Real Simple magazine cover is actually from March 1st, 2015, just came out. And, we're supposed to start this effort at age 30 to prevent ourselves from aging. And what exactly is going on here is we're running scared. We're running scared from aging and death. We're running scared from those wrinkles. And, one might interpret that as our wrinkles being an indication of the life that we will never live again, rather than perhaps a life well lived. John Rowe and Robert Kahn in the 1980s, I believe, wrote a seminal book called Successful Aging. They did a large study, and they put out a model of successful aging. This is a biomedical model. It's the best known, most widely applied model of successful aging, used in thousands of studies. And what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to minimize the risk of illness and disability, actively engage in life, and maximize our physical and mental abilities. This is all deficit-based. It's about getting away from what one might perceive the problems of aging, and it's by the goal here is for us to modify our aging process through our own actions. So we've got to manage, mingle, and move if we're going to age successfully. Physical function is a major characteristic of this model of successful aging, and that is one of the major flaws of this model, as well as some other flaws that I'm going to point out as we go along. So basically, the model has been criticized as elitist because guess what? Only the people who escape physical illness, disability, are the ones who can age successfully. The question is exactly which one of us is going to escape physical illness and disability? None of us, right? And none of us are going to escape death, and somehow, how do we then age successfully? So when researchers looked at this, and this health and retirement study was over 9,000 individuals, and they looked at 4 different points in time, using those criteria, only about 11 to 12% of older adults were aging successfully. And in another large study, what they call a systematic review that looked at 28 studies examining successful aging, you can see when good physical functioning was required, only 27% qualified. Now, when they took that criteria out, and you didn't have to be physically well and able to function, the rates went up to about 64%. So illustrating this in a different way, in another study, they looked at how many people who are 80 to 100 meet these criteria for successful aging. So low probability of disease, and also in that, Rowan Kahn assumed you had low risk factors. So in this study, low probability of disease meant absence of congestive heart failure, cancer, high blood pressure, chronic pulmonary disease, and diabetes. High physical and cognitive capacity meant you could do all of your activities of daily living independently, and you were scoring in the normal range on cognitive tests. And active engagement in life meant that you had time with family or friends at least once a week. And guess what? Only 15% of people age 80 met those criteria. Everybody else would be said to not be aging successfully. When they looked at people 100 and above, you can see nobody met those criteria. So there's a definite problem with this particular model. So you're deliberately putting yourself at risk of ill health by being over 65, right? I love the following quotes. These are meaningful quotes to me. To be a person involves decline. Decline is part of being a person. Ceasing to be a person does not occur before death, and perhaps not even then in the opinion of many. So we are a person when we talk about personhood until we die, no matter what challenges we face, including Alzheimer's disease. But being a person does involve decline. It involves both becoming and unbecoming. So the question is successful aging possible despite disease and disability? So what do older adults say about successful aging? Well, if you ask older adults, if they're aging successfully, they tell you a whole different story. 92% of older adults say they're aging successfully, even if they have a disease or a disability. And what was important to them, it wasn't being free of disease, it was having the ability to engage with friends, to participate in activities, and greater resilience. And resilience is a term which refers to the bounce back factor, my ability to bounce back from the hardships of life. So, based on what older adults say, components of successful aging had to do with looking forward, adapting to your situation. It had more to do with attitude, with a sense of security. And an important part of this wasn't just financial security, but was a sense of knowing that they would be taken care of. A sense of health and wellness, but this was not about health in the sense of physical health. This was very broad. It included emotional and spiritual well-being, and of course engagement. So it wasn't really about how long I lived and whether or not I had a disease or disability. So these researchers again said, okay, well, what if we had different criteria for successful aging? What if we asked and looked at how the older adults rated their health? And so they asked a large group of older adults, how they rated their own health. And if older adults rated their health as good or excellent, they were viewed as successful agers. They also asked about the person's perceived economic status, so they used that as a measure of security. So if older adults said they were able to handle their basic emergencies, they could buy a small luxury once in a while, and they felt they could take care of their needs, they were viewed as economically secure. And they also asked them about how happy they were. Interestingly, these same 80-year-olds, when we use those criteria for successful aging, you can see 62% of these individuals were aging successfully. And at age 100, almost half of the individuals were aging successfully. So how do we age successfully? Well, one of the things we do is we optimize our abilities and we compensate for those things that are starting to change. And a great example of this is Arthur Rubinstein, who used this approach of selecting, optimizing, and compensating in playing music or playing the piano. He explained that he played fewer pieces, so he played the pieces he knew how to play the best. He practiced those pieces more often, and he used variations in contrast and speed to generate the impression that he was playing fast and to compensate for the loss in finger agility when he was playing the piano. So this is a way that he was able to successfully appear in public as a concert pianist even as he was growing older. So, but what if our health really changes, or what if we get Alzheimer's disease? Are we still, or do we still have that opportunity to age successfully? Well, I thought this study, which actually asked people with Alzheimer's disease how they rated their, how they would rate their lives, or asked them to rate their lives. And they asked them at month 1, and they asked them again at month 18. And there are many studies that say that people with Alzheimer's disease can give valid answers about how they view the quality of their life. And guess what predicted whether they rated themselves as having a good life at month 18? Had nothing to do with their Alzheimer's disease having progressed. They didn't have any, diabetes or other illnesses. It had all to do with their mood, lower anxiety, and being in relationships, having connections with friends and family. So even in the face of great disability, we have the opportunity to age successfully. And when it comes to people with dementia, I just want to make the point, those of us who are around those people have great responsibility to ensure that they have the opportunity to age successfully. And my commercial for Alzheimer's Family Services Center does a great job of that. So what about a faith-based approach to successful aging? And I would say that one word again, if the popular approach is escape, the faith-based approach is embrace. So before I start on this section of my talk, I just want to comment that, I do come from a Judeo-Christian perspective. You will see in the following slides a lot of passages from the Bible. You will also see quotes from Buddhist texts and from the Dalai Lama. I want you all to try to suspend your belief systems, because sometimes when we get hooked into thinking about a belief system, the wall comes up and we don't hear the truth. So what I want you to focus on, whether the words are from the psalmist or from the prophet or from Christ or from the apostles or from Buddha or from the Dalai Lama, is to focus on the truth, a truth that extends beyond any religious boundaries and can be found in spiritual traditions. So I'm going to ask you to stretch yourselves a little bit, because I will be talking from that primarily Judeo-Christian traditions, but I would like you to stretch yourselves to hear the truth. So one of my favorite stories about aging in the Bible is this story about Abraham and Sarah. And you know, Abraham, God had promised Abraham that he was going to be a father of a great nation, and you know, nothing was happening here. I mean, Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90 years old, and then one day these three angels visit and they show up and they say, you know, you're going to have a son, Abraham. And those of you who know the story, what did Sarah do? Laugh. She says, I'm barren. Ain't gonna happen, God. Well, guess what? 9 months later, Isaac shows up, right? So to me, the story is all about the surprises, the getting in the face of our assumptions of what we can experience as we grow older. What was that? I'm getting jokes from the breaks here. Oh, she doesn't want to be pregnant at 100. So, listen, if God wants you to be pregnant at 100, you're going to be pregnant at 100. Now, I have to tell you, this is my sort of evolution over the last few years of what I consider a faith-based model to successful aging. Rooted more in spirituality, and I think that successful aging is all about the ability to transcend the self, honor the body, value dependence, love God and others, and find meaning, ultimate meaning. So we're going to talk a little bit about each one of these. So here's just some passages to get you thinking. And the first one, he must become greater, I must become less, from John the Baptist. And if you know the story, John the Baptist is out there baptizing all these people, and the people around him say, well, John, you know, there's this new teacher, they're all going to him to be baptized. And John says, hey, that's okay, you know, it's not about me. I'm paving the way for someone who's greater than me. Now, you can take this passage literally. John's talking about he's paving the way for Christ. Let's move this passage up to the next level. He, representing God, representing the divine, representing the spiritual, the divine must become greater. John says, it's not about me. My ego has to become less. Is that the challenge of aging? That perhaps the divine has to become greater and the ego has to become less. And so in the next passage, Jesus is praying for the believers, and this is also from the Gospel of John. And what is interesting here is, again, when you look at the words, you hear Jesus talking about the wish for divine union. I have given them glory that you gave me, that they may be as one as we are one, I and them and you and me. I have made you known to them and will continue to make you known in order that the love you have for me may be in them and I myself may be in them. There's a divine union that's being talked about here that perhaps aging gives us an opportunity to move closer to. So there's this idea that, you know, this realization that we are all spiritual beings. And so before we go on, I actually asked David, who I just met this morning, to help me out with reading a little conversation with God. Now, Joshua Tillman is a writer. He has a blog on a website called Spirit of the Scripture, and I ran into his blog, and I found portions of it quite meaningful, and so David has kindly agreed to be Joshua, and I'm going to give you a microphone. Whoops. And I'm messing up my slides. While I get organized, if you can be patient with me. They told me this will work fine. Okay, so we're going to read part of this conversation with God, and I decided I needed to be God, just to remind you all, God has feminine qualities, right? Yes. All right. So, Joshua.
So you are the center of everything? Is that what you're saying?
Center, essential nature, consciousness, whatever you wish to label it, yes, I am that which is the being of it.
Even me?
Even you.
So you are my essential nature, my core. In other words, you are within me?
Naturally.
So how do I experience that which is within me?
Easy. Drop the me that you think you are.
That's deep, God. But how do you drop yourself? I mean, how do I drop the me to experience you?
All right, first let's examine you. Who do you think you are?
Well, I'm a person. I'm Joshua.
And who is Joshua?
Well, I'm a father of 2 children, husband to a beautiful wife. I teach 4th grade. I like fishing, reading, hiking, and spending time with the family. Sometimes I get lonely, bored, or even scared. I'm also...
Stop, that's not who you are.
What do you mean?
Is that who you are, or are those labels that you have created to define Joshua?
I guess they are labels that define me.
Right, and isn't Joshua just another label?
Yes.
So let me ask you again, who are you? And this time, I don't want to hear who Joshua is, I want to hear who you are. Remember, who you really are gives rise to Joshua, not the other way around.
Well, I guess I really don't know who I am.
And that's the problem with most of humanity. They have no idea of their identity, of their true identity. And so later, God says, I didn't say Joshua was God. I said your essential nature is God. Joshua is limited and impermanent. Like all things, Joshua will perish. However, your essential nature, the power of creation, is eternal and infinite. Don't you see? Through your life, I am, that I am, comes to be. From the infinite potential to the finite form. This finite form is always limited and it will always dissolve back into the infinite creative potential of which I am. And then a new creation will come about. That is my nature. I am the potential of all creation. I am the very act of creation itself. And so are you.
But where does that leave Jesus as a person? He came to earth to save us, right?
Here's the difference between religion and spirituality. Did Jesus come to save you, or did Jesus come to show you the way to salvation? One is a belief and a thought, which we have already established was limited. The other is an experience as oneness with me, which is permanent and unchanging, even though the world around you is always changing. So along this same line, Rabbi Shapiro, who writes a column for a magazine called Spirituality and Health, says, realize that you are a temporary expression of a singular and eternal self, God, Allah, Brahman, Mother, etc., that manifests all beings, the way that the ocean manifests waves. Just as there is no wave separate from the ocean, so there is no self separate from the self. At death, the temporal, relative, egoic self melts into the absolute self. Just as a wave melts into the ocean, you become what you are already, God. And I love the Buddhist metaphor of the ocean and the wave coming in from the ocean, that wave appears as though it has its own singular identity. But what does that wave do? That wave crashes back into that whole ocean to become part of the whole. And so Christine Longacre, who wrote a book called Facing Death and Finding Hope, a Tibetan Buddhist, said, if we think of this self-clinging ego as our true identity, then no wonder the thought of death is terrifying. So how do we transcend the self? Well, there's a lot of ways that on a day-to-day basis, we can practice overcoming ourselves and letting go of the ego. And certainly faith practices offer us that opportunity, as well as music and exercise and being absorbed in something we love, like I love to write, laughing at yourself, helping others, gets us beyond the I. The second part part of this is honoring the body. Two very important passages here. Did you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. And from the Buddha, your body is precious. It is your vehicle for awakening. Treat it with care. Similarly, reminding us to treat the body as sacred. And I point this out as an important part of successful aging because all of these things on the screen are really important. I think they are all very important. But from a faith-based perspective, we are doing it for a lot of different reasons. We're not doing it because we're running away from aging or we're running away from death. We're doing it because we honor our bodies as a gift from God. Value dependence. Now that's something that's tough for all of us to do. Those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. The parts that we think are less honorable, we treat with special honor. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part is honored. And compassion is key here. We, on a daily basis, reject our interdependence, and Dr. Oliver mentioned all these reasons we gather. We also, in the invocation, we also gather because we are truly interdependent. And we cannot survive without others. Interdependence is fundamental, but every day we resist that interdependence. And so Thomas Merton, who was a American Catholic and a Trappist monk in the mystic tradition, who pioneered dialogue with Asian spiritual traditions, said the whole idea of compassion is based on a keen awareness of the interdependence of all these living beings, which are all part of one another and all involved in one another. So this valuing dependence is an opportunity for us, and in the Bible, over and over again, there are passages that remind us of God's preference for the weak, and in fact that perhaps becoming weak is an opportunity for us and is a vehicle of God's grace for us. And so it allows us also, I think, to realize in a greater sense the radical equality between all of us as human beings, that we really are truly all on an equal playing field before the eyes of God. Stephen Post, who wrote The Moral Challenge of Alzheimer's Disease, said, Eugene Bianchi, who wrote Aging as a Spiritual Journey, talked about this great opportunity for growth through diminishments. And he said that that's our spiritual challenge as we grow older. And he said spiritual growth occurs as the older adult embraces and transcends the limitations of aging and death. To embrace one's diminishments requires hope and faith. Bianchi asserted, once one has faith that beneath, through, and beyond the diminishments, there is life-giving power that will draw special good for humanity from the diminishments. So do not lose heart, St. Paul says. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day, and that is our opportunity as we age, and also to realize our ultimate dependence on God, on the divine. Again, please don't let the words get in the way. And an important part of this is both the giving and the receiving of the help. That here Christ reminds us that it was when we helped the person that was sick or hungry that we actually were helping Christ. So, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of these least of my brothers, you did it to me. One of the amazing things about this passage is I think that we are being told that we help others. We are touching Christ. This is very similar to what Martin Buber, a Jewish theologian, talked about in I-thou relating, when we are truly able to relate to the other as a thou, to appreciate the other person and to connect with them in a deep way. we have an opportunity to experience the divine. So it's interesting that this same thread runs through Buddhist texts. If you do not tend one another, then who is there to tend you? Whoever would tend me, he should tend the sick. It's like the Buddha saying, well, you all want to come and hang out with me, and you want to take care of me. But that's not the point, folks. It's when you help others that you are really connecting with me. And again, another reminder that we are here to carry each other's burdens. And there are many ways we can do that, by helping each other, supporting each other, spending time together, pastoral care, sharing in the care of someone who is ill. But the hard part of this whole equation is the receiving, and I just put that verse there from the prophet Isaiah, who said, even in your old age and gray hairs, I am he who will sustain you. I have made you and I will carry you. I will sustain you and I will rescue you. Well, there's an issue here that basically there's a promise that God will take care of us. But how does God take care of us? God cares for us through other people. God comes to us through relationship. Now, we have to allow that. And we, again, are so good at rejecting help, pushing our independence, pushing the I. And the challenge here is to let go and to be able to receive help as well as to give help. So another component of successful aging is love God and love others. There's only 2 commandments. We learn in the New Testament, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and all your mind. This is the great and first commandment, and the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Not only that, you shall love your enemies, the second passage reminds us. There must be no limit to your goodness, as the Heavenly Father's goodness knows no bounds. And again, I want to point out to you that this same thread runs through Eastern as well as Christian traditions. Again, the command here, no greater love has one than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. And from a Buddhist text, this Buddhist text is from about 700 AD, if I recall correctly. Just as a mother would protect her only child at the risk of her own life, even so cultivate a boundless heart towards all beings. Let your thoughts of boundless love pervade the whole world. And the Dalai Lama reminds us, compassion is the radicalismness of our time. You know, we're going to talk about mindfulness today. And if you read the Dalai Lama, one of the goals of mindfulness is to train ourselves in being ever more compassionate human beings. And I hope that you'll think about that today as we learn about the practice of mindfulness. So how do we cultivate this compassion? And as I mentioned, that takes practice. Certainly from the Christian tradition, there's this ongoing dialogue that we have with the divine. Pray without ceasing. Reveal God's love in your life with others. I'm going to come back to that because from the Judeo-Christian tradition, one of our jobs or purposes in life is to glorify God, to reflect his image to others. Stay active with divine purpose. So the goal here, again, thinking back to that popular approach to aging, well, there was a lot in there about staying active, but what about staying active with divine purpose? Being a more compassionate human being, helping others, strive for radical equalities, enjoy, take care of, appreciate life's gifts. In everything, give thanks. And again, from Eastern tradition, very much in line with this, may I be a protector for the unprotected, a guide of travelers on the way, a boat, a raft, or a bridge for those who long to cross to the other shore. May I be an isle for those who seek an island, a lamp for those who wish for light, a shelter for those in need of rest, a servant for those in need of service. Find meaning, the last component of successful aging. Now, here you can go to the book of Ecclesiastes, and the teacher who writes the book of Ecclesiastes, his challenge is, what is the meaning of life? Everything is utterly meaningless. What do people gain from all the work they do? We all face those questions about our lives. Nobody's going to remember us. And Erik Erikson, a famous developmental psychologist, said that our challenge as we age, in the last developmental stage of life, is to resolve this challenge of what was the meaning of my life, to look back and to find meaning in it, to feel like their life hasn't been wasted, that there's no significant regrets, and that creates a sense of integrity and wisdom, versus a despair or hopelessness over the life that has been lived. So the question is, have we fulfilled our purpose in life? And here's where we get back to, well, what in the world is our purpose in life from a Judeo-Christian perspective? Well, what does God require of you? But to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. And I wonder if aging is all about learning how to walk humbly with our God, whatever that means to us. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. And let's not think about that in a simplistic fashion. This is not about going to church and worshiping. This is about reflecting the image of God to others in your daily life more than anything else. And that love that God is. And I think Mother Teresa got it right. I'm a little pencil in the hand of a writing God who is sending a love letter to the world. Can you be that little pencil? So the Dalai Lama, again, and the shortage of time, is emphasizing here that our challenge is to develop love and compassion, that we can develop true sympathy for others' suffering and the desire to remove their pain. And as a result, our own serenity and inner peace will increase. But some of us fall short of our purpose, and many fall very short of our purpose. And what happens when you have been so challenged in your life, and perhaps have you lived your life in a way that has not been the best? Well, we have this reassurance that God rescues us from the pit. So even in those situations that there is forgiveness, and that we have this opportunity as we grow to redefine our lives in the context of aging. Forget about middle-age values. This is about a whole new phase, whether it's spending your time in a contemplative way, volunteering, doing new things, achieving wisdom in the face of death itself. And so this is what I believe a truly faith-based or spiritually based path to successful aging involves. Transcend the self, honor the body, value dependence, love God and others, and find meaning. And I am almost done to ease Cindy's worries. I want to make some points about the differences between these two approaches. So the popular approach is culturally acceptable. This is a counterculture way of looking at aging. The popular approach says the best way to age is to deny it. And I'm saying embrace it. And the popular approach is all about me. It is about the ego. And this faith-based approach is an other-focused approach. Other human beings, other the divine. The body as functional versus the body as sacred. In the popular approach, our goal is how do we maintain or return to our youth, and in the faith-based approach, it's all about how do we grow through our diminishments. In the popular approach, all about independence, staying in control, making my own decisions and choices, versus valuing interdependence and allowing oneself to be even more interdependent. Popular approach doesn't really say anything about how we develop our inner selves. It's all about our outer selves, versus the faith-based approach where our focus ought to be on cultivating compassion. Popular approach, activity for health, and I would suggest we have activity for a divine purpose. And in the popular approach, there's really not a lot of concern about meaning for life, whereas in the faith-based approach, we're looking for an avenue to integrity. And in the faith-based approach, we really see death as a developmental process. We walk through death as the person is evolving, not disappearing, and I apologize for the typo there. So just when the caterpillar thought the world was over, it became a butterfly. So I don't know if we have any time for comments or questions. I think just a couple of minutes, and guess what? No use of cough drop, Kleenex, or water. Yay! All right. Thank you all for your attention. Any comment at this point? Yes?
I'm just curious that you said Australians and the more Christians that involved in the study than Australians.
Yeah, it's from the Georgia Centenarian Study, and again, there are only a certain number of us to live in that live into those age brackets, and I think those were the people that were available and volunteered for the research. Yes?
Yeah, I'm noticing, I mean, that retirement age may be 66, but the aging process for a lot of people these days, 66 is what they'll say the new middle age. And people are living way longer than the 80s. 80 is young these days.
Right, right.
So, and I'm not just going to the numbers because I'm getting older. I mean, has that been addressed at all? Are you looking at the aging process as people are healthier for a longer time? What are you finding with that?
Well, I think I would defer there to Dr. Claudia Kawas at UCI, who has a very large 90-plus study and who is looking at individuals who age to past age 90 and how they might be different from people who die younger. And I can't speak to all of that research today. I'm not prepared to do that, but that is certainly, you can look her up on the internet, look up the UCI Mind website. You can find out a lot of information about the oldest old that we're learning today. Yes?
I just wanted to point out that Pope Francis, in his conference for the 2015 Day of the Sick, made a comment about the fact that when you visit sick people, such love and appreciation you show for that individual. And he was contrasted with the grace of the quality of life that implies that if you're sick, you're not just living.
Right, that's a wonderful comment about Pope Francis, who recently talked about going to visit the sick, and that we need to change our way we think about quality of life, which seems to imply that people who are sick are not in some way is not worth living, or they can't have quality of life, and the importance of our being with the sick and showing that love and compassion. I think time for one more comment if anyone has one. Otherwise, I'm going to turn this back over to Cindy. I thank you so much for your attention this morning.